Yeah, I'm talking about the low end. So
Mm-hmm.
the low end shape, in pop music, like if you pull up just about any pop music, what you hear is a very centered low end, right? So the stuff that's panned to the sides doesn't have a lot of low end to it. It's fairly thin. And that's what pop music is. Like subconsciously, a lot of music is just subconscious cues and trickery. So like the low end being centered without much low end or low mid range even on side material, that gives you this very deep, what I call V shape to the low
Mm-hmm.
end. And when someone hears that for 5 seconds, they know it's pop because that's the shape of pop. It's got kick and bass and vocal and nothing with any meat or girth of any sort panned to the side. And that helps with the low end. It helps to stay out of the way because, of course, when things are side panned and they have low end, they're interfering because, of course, everything in the middle occurs not in the middle, it occurs on both sides, right? So kick and bass are 50-50 here and here. But when you bring in other stuff that has low end and low mids, it's also here and here. So a deep shape like pop is contrasted with a sort of medium shape, which would be, kind of most of music, where you've got some low endy stuff and low mid stuff on the side, and it connects psychoacoustically with the kick and bass, again, because there's only two speakers. So the thing that's panned over to the side has the low end or the low mids, but below it is the kick and the bass. And so those things kind of hook up over here. And the kick and bass over here might hook up with a different thing that has its own low end. So that's kind of, the medium V is kind of the normal, quote unquote, most of music. And then you have this sort of very wide shape where you have really kind of messy low end, which I find a lot of beginners tend to do this. They don't do enough cutting of what's panned to the side. Here's a novice mistake: wide panning toms
Mm-hmm.
and having them have a ton of low end.
Oh.
So wide panning toms is kind of passe anyway. I mean, you can do it if you want. I'm not here to tell anyone how to mix. Maybe it'll be the greatest song ever, and you should do what your heart desires. But wide panning toms with a lot of low end is just a disaster. If we think of like pop music, most of music, and then we think of this shape, it'd be more like, I don't know what you'd call it today. There's not a lot of music that's shaped that way. It used to be what we call indie, like indie rock. I'm talking like 80s, 90s. I don't really, we're in more of a pop era, so we don't really have a lot of that music where the kick and the bass are just not really so groove driven. It's more like a band in a room kind of a vibe. It's more of a naturalism, like a more realistic thing. So you have more low end on the sides. And so that's a very different shape than this shape or this shape. And those three general shapes, obviously, these are just conceptual. We work in between all the time. But these three general shapes are very distinctly different to an audience. So if you have a song that should be kind of this, because it's like a rock band, let's say, with guitars, but you've got this coming out, this pop thing, that would lead someone to feel like it was maybe overproduced, expression that's not used a lot anymore, but used to be used a lot when some sort of a rock thing in maybe the 90s or maybe the 80s, but really came out in the 90s. When a rock thing was too pop, it was really about the shaping of the low end. There wasn't enough low end on the sides for it to feel more real and more authentic, So that shaping is just a 2-second, 5-second indicator of what we're in for stylistically. And so, on a record, I might play with mid-side shaping differently song to song to complement and contrast what each song is doing, because this song is maybe a bit more pop than this one. And, you can kind of see how that becomes its own little artistic tweak. None of these things are huge. They're just, it's mastering is 1,000 subtle choices that add up to a wow. I'm the guy that tests cables, and lately I was testing AES cables on digital, and I was surprised to find they sound different. I've got certain tubes in my equipment. I've got certain fuses in my amplifiers. I mean, it's pretty much any rabbit hole you can think of. I've been down the rabbit hole. Greg Wells very sweetly one day called me the rabbit. He was he introduced me to a Canadian client, and we were talking about Atmos, and then we started talking about something else, and he's like Brian's just like, he's down every rabbit hole, like, and he's like, actually he's just the rabbit. And I was like, oh, that's very sweet. I'll take that. I said, can I repeat that you said that? He said, yeah, it's fine. So back to the shape of the beat. That's just one of the things that is part of this cocktail of winning people over. You know, what I'm here to do is make sure that the music that people make finds its widest audience and has the most impact on its core audience. And so that's that, you know, shaping of low end and how mid-side works and how punch works and how the subconscious interpretation happens very much automatically with people with different elements of music, whether it be frequency balance, distortion, compression to transient, mid-side. Those are kind of the pillars, you know, the mastering works in. If you were gonna formalize it and put it into, you know, sort of, you know, if I go into teacher mode here, because I do teach. I am teaching now first Monday of every month. The sort of the four pillars are pretty simple things. You know, you've got EQing, which is frequency balance. You've got transient to compression balance, which is, you know, compressors and limiters. You've got harmonic distortion balance, which is, you know, adding, or you can't really take away, but sometimes you can add, and it seems like you took away. And then you've got the mid-side power balance. So those four things really, you know, in the most basic sense, plus how they work together, obviously, you know, that's kind of the foundations of the mastering tools. They're very simple tools. Using them in an advantageous way is a whole other thing. But on paper, it's pretty straightforward. You know, what do? Well, I EQ a little, I compress a little, I limit, you know, or compress a little, I do some harmonic stuff, and I play with mid-side. That's what I do. You know, that's the engineering simplicity.
To watch the full video, click the link below, and don't forget to subscribe.